Terence lives a dragon's life and enjoys his time in the forests and mountains communing with nature. He also walks in a 3D world of science and technology, sharing his healing light and cleansing flame with others. He came to his path of sovereignty and joy after suddenly awakening to his true nature in middle age. His practice includes the hidden traditions of Buddhism, Taoism, Christian Gnosticism, Tantra, and ancient tribal practices. He considers himself a powerful and magical Taoist witch.
Esme lives a mermaid's life by the sea and writes poetry and prose to heal and inspire herself and others. She believes nature is life's greatest teacher, and her craft involves the aligning and balancing of objects, people, and energies to create better flow. She practices in various fields: creative writing, design, research, feng shui, acupressure massage, earth-based ritual, and yoga. Esme was raised in the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism and has studied Tantra and Taoist philosophies, as well as pagan practices. She considers herself a magical and powerful Taoist witch.
We're here with Esme and Terence, authors of the book Tigress and Dragon of 100 Lifetimes, an erotic memoir of sacred consorts. You've chosen to write a book on relationships, sexual alchemy, and sovereignty. I'm curious why you chose to write on this topic.
So, about 10 years ago, I started a practice of meditation and yoga, primarily for stress reduction and stress management. But I found myself rather unexpectedly on a spiritual path very quickly. And that spiritual path led me to tantric practice. And I studied with Taoist tantric and Hindu tantric masters. And in the tantric practices, sexual energy is not repressed as it is in many practices. It's actually utilized and celebrated. And it's utilized for personal health and well-being. It's utilized for healing, and it's utilized for spiritual growth as well. And so, and I practiced for many years in those lineages. And when Esme and I came together and started to become intimate, all those practices that I was doing by myself or as a practitioner or as a receiver suddenly really came alive and kind of took a life of their own. The sexual energy that we generated together was tenfold more than I had ever experienced before. And the healing that I had experienced and the transformation that I experienced in the context of our relationship was unlike anything I had experienced in individual practice. And this effect, the power of this sexual energy, this sexual alchemy, to that degree, I had never really heard talk about or read about or certainly had described to me. So I thought that this was something that was unique and powerful, and actually, the way we describe it, rather accessible to anybody, really. So I thought that this was something that was worth sharing. As an extension of individual tantric practice, or even as most tantric practices are taught in the context of relationship. So it's not really about saving your relationship. It's about using that sexual energy to for your own personal healing and of your own wounds, as well as the relational wounds, and in the process, deepen intimacy in the context of that relationship.
Thanks, Terence. So, not to contradict Terence, but we actually didn't begin by choosing to write a book on relationships, sexual alchemy, and sovereignty. The book has its roots on the two of us writing each other love letters after we had seen each other, because we live 3,200 miles apart. And every time we saw one another, things that were happening were so amazing in our experience that we capture them by writing each other these really sweet vignettes about our experiences. Well, come 2 or 3 years in the relationship, we had over 25 vignettes of things that happened between us. And we're like, wait a minute, I think we're writing a book. So we got together in this cabin in Colorado with a whole bunch of sticky notes, which those of you who know me or don't know me know that I love sticky notes. And we had all the sections of love letters and writings that we had done for each other, emails printed out and on sticky notes. And we started organizing them and realized, yeah, we actually have a book. So that was when the choice was made to write a book. But like many things in life, you just start going somewhere and all of a sudden organically it starts to like come together in some kind of a pattern. Well, our relationship and our sharings with each other came together in this pattern that was about sexual alchemy and sovereignty. This is the distillation of our 3 years of relating to one another. And the decision to write the book was really the decision to share with others other than ourselves. And the reason why we decided to share is because, as Terence said, this is a very unique experience. Neither of us, though we have experienced many relationships, have really experienced something quite like this. So I feel, and I think we both feel, that it was important to share this experience with others and share our story, share the alchemy, and potentially inspire others, or mainly even just connect with others. Because in writing this book, we feel more connected to others who are in the relationship path, because now we've chosen to talk about it. And through the process of publishing it and sharing it with others, we're getting more ideas about relationships, life, and alchemy.
I'm curious about the title. What is this about the Tigress and Dragon?
Well, the Tigress and Dragon are, in Chinese mythology, mythological beings. The Tigress is a manifestation of the feminine energy, the divine feminine, the yin principle in Chinese medicine, just in the same way that Shakti is a manifestation of the divine feminine in Indian philosophy. The dragon is the manifestation of the divine masculine, the yang principle, just as Shiva is in Indian philosophy. And the dragon and the tigress live in separate realms. The dragon lives in the sky, flies through the sky. The tigress roams the earth, stalking her prey through the jungle. And they go about their separate lives. But when they come together, their energy of their connection creates the universe. The universe is manifested out of that connection. And just in the same way that when two lovers come together, or when Esme and I come together, the power of our sexual energy manifests the relationship and manifests the universe in which we occupy.
Can you describe what a sacred consort is?
Yes, a sacred consort is a container of a relationship, but of a very specific container. It's not necessarily husband or wife or girlfriend and boyfriend, client and practitioner. It is a container where two people can come together and be very present with each other in intimacy, in sexuality, in the way that they behave around one another, where the time is really just focused on presence and intimacy and deep connection. So this isn't special in terms of only people who have time can do this. A sacred consort can be a container within a regular relationship where two people can go to work, parent together, and yet create a space where they both show up as sacred consort to one another. In that space, they prioritize each other. They look into each other's eyes as they make love. They listen to each other intently as they're sharing. And it's a very specific time and a very specific container for relating. So we felt that it was useful to have this container because everyone's so busy. We live far away from each other. And if we were going to come together and talk about chores or life goals or, do all these regular things, we felt like we would not feel like we had enough time for intimacy. So we developed it as a super concentrated container for intimacy, for relational goods. And it turns out that it's an excellent way to have a relationship with someone. So even though we developed it because we live far away from each other, we don't get to see each other all the time, I think it's just as useful for people who see each other every day to find maybe 3 hours in a week to be each other's sacred consorts. Or people who just meet to say, hey, let's be sacred consort. And then rather than putting all these conditions we tend to put on for who we relate with, right? Like, oh, they have to have this certain job or a certain age or meet these goals. No, you just choose a person that you feel you can connect to and come to it with full presence. So that's what sacred consort is. Terence, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, there's an analog in tantric practice for sacred consorts. Two practitioners who have been practicing for a long time will come together and practice together. And it's the purpose of that practice is not for creating a love relationship or deep intimacy. It's for facilitating the channeling and the running and the utilization of the individual's sexual energy. So, and just in the same way, and that's a special container for just practice. Whereas when Esme and I talk about it, we're talking about it in the context of the relationship, but it is that same special container that we create and that anyone can create in relationship to make the intimacy and the sexual energy a special place.
You describe very deep practices in the book that are unique. How did you come by these understandings and practices?
Many of the practices began with the practices that I learned and the practices that Esme learned in our individual practices before we met. And those practices were transformational for each of us individually. And then when we came together, as I mentioned before, the amplification of the sexual energy really was even more transformative in our healing. And so when we came together, initially the practices that we were talking about and experiencing were kind of extensions or analogs of the individual practices that we have, kind of adapted to couples practice. At some point in our relationship, we began actually channeling practices as well, much in the same way as an artist will channel a painting, or a jazz musician may channel an improv solo, or Michelangelo channeled David out of a hunk of marble. And so where does that come from? It comes from source, it comes from previous lifetimes. Who knows where it comes from? It's just kind of a natural manifestation of that energy that creates these practices. And so once the practices come to us, we just kind of start exploring with it and having fun with it and being playful with it and kind of developing, more and more practices. And then the book is kind of the record of some of those practices that we came to.
I myself had been studying sexuality since my 20s. I remember reading books and looking at diagrams about how an individual could run sexual energy through their entire body and not, just at their pelvis and going, oh, I like to try that. And then seeing pictures about how two people can run energy together and said, gosh, I like to try that someday with another person. So for me, there were many years of studying meditation, studying yoga, studying tantric bhakti yoga practice, many, many studies with myself, with groups. And it wasn't until I met Terence, who is my match energetically, that we found that doing these practices amplified our own vitality and our own energies. And so the more we practiced, the stronger we got, the better we felt, the closer we got, the more we healed. So then we're wondering, well, what if we took what we knew and developed some more practices? So it was very generative. Some of it came from books and past practices and groups. And then some of it just came from, as Terence said, it was just channeled. It was just we were inspired as we started doing a breathing practice during sexuality to do a few more and to try different variations. And over time, we stumbled upon a set of practices that we feel really enhances connection between two people, not just mentally or emotionally, but also on a soul level. Because these practices make you feel very close to the other person. And we felt that it was really beautiful. And that's one of the reasons why we share them in the book. But the understanding didn't just come from reading, it actually came from embodying them in practice with another person. So, what I would expect is if two people sat down and even took some of our practices and tried them, they may come up with more practices because the practices are very much about opening your energy to another person. And then from there, sort of being co-creative, like being very open to the other person suggesting something and then coming back and trying it out. So, yeah, it's our hope that people would be playful with these.
This book talks a lot about intimacy. Tell us more about what people can do to improve intimacy.
Well, my first answer is actually that intimacy starts with self. That without really knowing yourself, how you tick, what you need in order to feel well, how much space you need, how much connection you need, intimacy with another person would be very difficult. So, the first step in intimacy, I feel, is some kind of a practice, either a meditation practice, a physical practice, or even regular time in nature where you are really connecting with yourself without all the distractions of modern life so that you know you. And then intimacy with another, I feel, is about openness. It's about opening to connecting with another person in presence, about prioritizing that time with the other person so that you really see and hear, feel, and sense them. So bringing the sensory in as well as the special time is what I feel is intrinsic to building intimacy with others. I see so many people, though, being very much about doing something with the other without first having a foundation of self intimacy. And a lot of time that leads to issues because intimacy can really trigger people. So without a practice where you can come back to yourself when you're triggered, intimacy can create a lot of triggers where people may blame one another for wounds or for things that aren't going well. So what I've found to be very useful in intimacy is to come and share with another, but then know myself enough where if I'm not feeling grounded, if I'm not feeling compassionate, to kind of pull into myself and work with that before I go and I talk to my partner. So it's not just opening everything. There is a sense of knowing yourself enough to be responsible so that your intimacy creates a positive and compassionate environment for the two of you to grow together and not just about, spending time together and having fun.
I think it comes down to a couple of things. The first is presence, as Esme mentioned. That is being really present for your partner and for yourself. So, for example, and it's particularly apparent in lovemaking. When you're making love to your partner, look into their eyes, touch them, touch their face, participate in the process. Don't just be box checking when you're making love. Really do it and really feel it and experience there and be in your body and not in your head. Don't be thinking about who's taking the kids to soccer practice on Thursday. Don't be thinking about, how much work you're going to have to do tomorrow in the office because you didn't get your assignment done today. Don't be thinking about what you're going to be watching on Netflix after you're done. Don't be fantasizing about that hot-looking actor that was in the movie you just watched. Be really there for your partner. And that's not just restricted to lovemaking. It's in everyday activities, that every opportunity that you're interacting with your partner is an opportunity to deepen intimacy. So be physically present when you're having a conversation. Look into their eyes. Listen to actually what they're saying. And, I'm not suggesting that we all spend 24/7 with one another. We go mad if we did that. We all need our own space, right? But when you are having that interaction, and it is a sincere interaction, pay attention, be there, be right there with them. And that has so much power to know that your partner is your focus of their attention, and they know that you are focusing on them. The other key element is that of vulnerability. And that's a difficult one. If you want to be intimate with somebody, you need to let them in, and they need to let you in. And what I mean by that is we're all wounded in some way. Some of us are very seriously wounded through physical abuse or sexual abuse or psychological or emotional abuse. And, that makes you want to close in and keep people out because it feels safer that way. And even, people who have, perfect childhoods, for example, and don't suffer any abuse like that. We all suffer insults. We all suffer slights. We all suffer disappointments. We all suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? And so all that makes you want to put up armor and keep other people out. But you have to let that armor down to let the other people in, to open your heart to your partner. Otherwise, there can be no intimacy. You're just kind of locked in your own little world. So, and that takes time, and it's hard. It takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes some healing. You have to kind of look at yourself, as Esme was saying, and understand, why do I feel that I have to close down so much? Why can't I open? And that's where the magic of the sexual energy comes in, and the healing power of the sexual energy, because the sexual energy not only illuminates your triggers and your things that make you feel a little bit ooky, it gives you if you embrace it and run it and channel it, it gives you the power and the incentive to drop some of that armor. Because the more you drop your armor, the deeper the intimacy becomes. The deeper the intimacy, the more fantastic the sexual energy is, which helps the healing, which deepens the intimacy, which makes the sex even better. And so it's a self-licking ice cream cone after a while. It just becomes this very, very powerful and delicious and fun experience. And so that's really the key to the intimacy. And I thought it would be kind of fun if we could, Esme and I could share a couple little intimacy practices with the audience. Do you want to give that a try?
First, I want an ice cream. But yes, let's give that a try.
Sure.
So the first practice we want to share is called the appreciation practice. And this can be done with a partner or even with a friend or a parent. And basically, you say something you appreciate about the other person.
Esme, I appreciate how you show up so fully to our relationship when we travel so far to see one another.
Thank you, Terence. Terence, I appreciate the presence that you give me when you touch me. The presence you give me is very healing and very calming, and at the same time, it really has helped my body open up and receive more pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Esme, I appreciate how enthusiastically you show up for our co-creating our book project. It's really exciting and rewarding to experience that. So thank you.
Yeah, so that's the appreciation practice. I want to share another practice that's a little bit edgier, but still very intimacy producing. So often we know what we want from our partner, and we even know the things we want from our partner that our partner probably won't give us. And what happens over time is we kind of push that away. Like, oh, I'm not going to get that, so I'm not going to ask for it. Or if I ask for it, this person better give it to me. So there is a practice called a longing practice. And the longing practice is about the power of longing and the power of communicating longing and the power of being vulnerable with your partner. So when you confess a longing to your partner, it's really not about when are they going to meet it. You don't start a timer and say, okay, now that I've told you, 2 months. No, it's about opening yourself up to a level of vulnerability and sharing that. And the beauty of it is all the partner has to do is say, thank you for that longing. So you make an agreement ahead of time that this is about vulnerability. This is about sharing your deepest desires and not about problem solving. So, for example, Terence, I long to live closer to you so that we can see each other more often.
Thank you for that longing, Esme.
Hmm.
Esme, I long to share a mountain cabin with you where we can get away and be together and share our energy.
Thank you, Terence. So, yeah, that's the longing practice.
Yeah, so both of these practices that we described, we generally sit face to face, looking into each other's eyes, holding hands, in kind of an intimate pose. So it's really an exercise in presence, and it's an exercise in vulnerability. I'd like to just describe another practice, which is kind of fun, and we won't demonstrate it for you, but we'll describe it. Whenever we need to have a challenging conversation in which one might get triggered, or there might be some energetic charge involved in the conversation. What we do is we sit on a love seat facing one another, and we take off our socks and shoes, and we present each other with our feet. And so we start to do a mutual foot rub with one another. And after a few minutes of that, we begin to have the conversation that we need to have, whether it's about the next time we're coming to visit, or some other challenging topic or something like that, where there might be some emotional charge. And we find that it's really difficult to get angry with somebody when they're rubbing your feet. And it's really difficult to kind of lash out and say something nasty about somebody who's rubbing your feet. And if you feel that if you start to get triggered by the conversation, you know that because of the physical connection that you're experiencing with this person, your partner, they are actually giving you love in a very physical and embodied way, much more powerful than saying, I love you. You're actually touching their feet and giving them pleasure while they're getting triggered. So they know they're being held for that point of vulnerability that they're experiencing. And it's really it's an awesome practice, and it's not sexual, but it's very sensual. You can do that in front of your kids if you really want to freak them out. It's really pretty fun. And we find that we actually use this practice a lot, even when it comes down to like deciding where we're going to go for dinner or something like that. It's like, hey, why not? Let's rub each other's feet while we talk about this. So it's kind of a fun, playful thing, as well as being very effective at mitigating or not smoothing over, but facilitating some of the more difficult discussions that we might need to have.
Thanks, Terence. I have amazing memories of foot rubs from you. This also brings up something that I feel very strongly about, is that a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about intimacy or talking about difficult topics. And while that can bring up intimacy or bring more intimacy, often it's not supposedly that comforting if you're talking about difficult topics. But physical intimacy, human to human, is very, very healing. Touch is very healing. It helps increase oxytocin, which is really good for our brains. And it goes a long way in developing trust and relationship. And sometimes I find that in this society, people get very intellectual about relationships and partnerships. They want to define roles and make plans for the future. And what I have to say is, get very present time, holding someone's hand when they're upset, giving someone a massage when they're sore, rubbing feet when you want to talk about something and you know that it might be difficult for you or your partner. Giving physical compassion and physical touch enhances intimacy in a way that, goes beyond, everything you can talk about. Because on some level, we are physical beings. And though we love our ideas, we love touch just as much. So that's my plug for foot rubs and embodiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the takeaway message from the book? Who would benefit most from your book?
I feel like one of the biggest takeaways of the book is that being in relationship with another with presence and an intent to support can be very healing, and can be very like a vehicle for personal and spiritual growth. That two people coming together to support each other sort of nets beyond what one can do individually in a healing path because of the support, the love, but also that you don't really know, your relational wounds until you're in relationship. So the book is a lot about coming together in relationship and realizing that we have relational wounds, and then using the intimacy, using the physical touch, using the sexual alchemy to help each other work through those wounds, to give each other both motivation and energy, as well as compassionate support. So one of the key takeaways is that relating to others, in our case, it's a romantic, passionate relationship. But I believe that relating to others in a way that's positive is very, very effective for helping each other grow. As to who would benefit most from the book, I think everyone could benefit. I think everyone can benefit from understanding how good relational habits can enhance your own growth and others' growth. But I feel the people that would be most attracted to it are people that are either in new relationships. And, I've seen this over and over again. Someone buys the book and they're like, I can't wait to read it with my new lover. They're in new relationships and they want to have new ideas about what to do with one another. But there's also people who've been in relationships for a long time who could pick up the book and, see different ways of relating. So I feel like there's a span of people who want to relate with another person. But I also see just someone who longs for a relationship. They can read this book and go, oh, okay, I can see this example of these two people helping each other heal. And at the same time, the book talks about concepts that are super individual, like self-responsibility, like having your own meditation practice, or that, if you're not sovereign, if you are not sort of in mastery of self, then intimacy and relationship is very difficult. So there's a lot of concepts there, as well as examples there, where an individual who's not in relationship can be inspired to practice.
Yeah, right on. I think I can't really add a lot to that, but I think one takeaway is that is the power of the connection, the intimate connection, and the sexual energy that results from that connection as a vector for healing and personal growth. And that is not just some esoteric practice that you might read about in some ancient tantric text. That's a real physical, experiential practice. It's something that you do not by reading about it or talking about it, as Esme said, it's actually by doing it. And so if you're open-hearted and open-minded enough to dive in and explore and interested in exploring, you can come to these practices just as easily as Esme and I did. And the power of them to heal and to illuminate and to facilitate growth is immense. That's the experience in my life and the experience in our relationship. As to who most benefits from the book, I think the book, I think it's inspirational for anyone who's seeking something different in their relationship. We present the model of a relationship, which is kind of outside the what I would say the normal or the typical paradigm of a relationship in this culture anyway, where you're kind of on this escalator of achievement, where you meet and you start going steady, and then you become intimate, and then you move in together, and then you get married, and you have the kids, and you send your kids off to college, and it's just the next thing. There's happiness after the next corner, happiness after the next corner, and that's not really the way you become intimate. That's kind of the way you become separate in a relationship. And the model that we describe focuses on the two individuals and doing things that enhance that intimacy, rather than focusing on, what a great school you're going to send your kids to. You're focusing on, hey, let's spend some time together touching one another. That's how you build intimacy. It's not about all the great achievements you get, or what a great job you have, or what a nice car you have, or how smart your kids are. It's about that deep, personal, intimate connection you can have with this other human being. And that's what, at the end of the day, makes you feel fulfilled and joyous and just deliciously happy about your life. So I hope that people are inspired by that message, and that they read it and they look at it and say, that's a little different. Let's try this. Or, as Esme said, for somebody who's just starting out, boy, this is a different way of having a relationship. The choices that my parents made, or the choices that my siblings made, or the choices that my friends are making, after 5 or 6 or however many years, they don't look so happy after a while. This is something different that can, I think, give some lasting power and some connection into a relationship. And, we're not, I wouldn't suppose that we are saying that we're going to save anybody's relationship with this book. It's just a point of inspiration. And this worked for us. It's pretty cool. Why don't you give it a try?
Yeah, that makes me think of another thing that one of my mentors mentioned recently upon reading the book. And what she said was, this is not about having a relationship for societal acceptance or having a relationship for survival strategy, but having a relationship based on resonance with another being. And I think that is something we can all be inspired about, is can we be free from all our strategies around society and survival, and just see in one another where we resonate and then relate from there, So that gives everybody the freedom to be who they are without you having to get those things from them. And I think that's one of those things that we model in the book and that we speak about and that we have lived, is just we are together based on the fact that we resonate, and we do practices to enhance our resonance. And where we don't resonate, we allow each other to have the space to be somewhere else. And, we celebrate where we are together, but we don't preclude the other person from being who they are in entirety. We don't make the other person conform for us to feel more secure, because our security is not based on relationship. It's based on self-intimacy and self-knowledge. And then the security comes because there's a strong resonance, and you want to come back to that strong resonance. It's based on desire. It's not based on obligation. And so I feel like that's one of the biggest takeaways of the book.
Thank you, Esme and Terence, for your time.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure having the opportunity to talk about the book. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, thanks very much.